All right, thanks everybody for showing up at 4:45 on Wednesday, the last sessions of the official tracks we've got going. You're probably getting a little tired of diving deep into web APIs at this point, but think they've saved the best for last. Invocation is the groundwork for everything that enables flow and peak in the BlackBerry 10 paradigm, really. So it should be interesting. Hope it's interesting for you guys. My name is Ken Wallis. I'm the product manager for WebWorks, if you haven't been in any of my sessions yet.
I'm Nukul, and I'm the team lead for WebWorks.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what Invocation Framework is. Like I said, this is the underlying layer that connects all the pieces of the system and third-party apps together and allows you to make calls to specific targets, or even for specific actions that you don't necessarily care about the target that you want to hit. So if you've got some content or some functionality that you want to leverage from another application, you use the Invocation Framework, and you have a lot of different parameters you can use to say, I know specifically I want to hit this app and I want to do this action on it, or something more generic like, I just know I have a picture and I want the user to view it, and I don't care what application does it. I want the user to choose or the system to figure that out. And so there's a lot of different options here, and you have that kind of ability to be really specific or more generalized in how you do it. Part of that, obviously, in the middle here is about querying. So the Invocation Framework will provide you the capability to query what's available from the system, both kind of what actions are available as well as what targets expose functionality related to that action. So viewing a picture, there could be 3 applications that say, I am a viewer for image files, and then you can either say, provide a UI to the user to select which one to use after you've queried the targets, or you can leave it to the system to figure that out. Menu service is a piece of the Invocation Framework that helps actually populate the list of possible menu items related to a specific context or action. So if you've seen a lot of demos by now about the context menu that comes in from the right, that's in a WebWorks application triggered most often from a long press on a piece of content in your page. So if it's an image, the context menu will come in and it will be populated again by the framework with actions that relate to that type of content. So for an image, it would be view image, share the image type, that kind of thing. And then the invocation also has the ability for you not only to just link to the data somewhere else, but you can also actually transfer data from your application, the actual data, instead of just references to a file system or a remote URL or something like that.
Yeah, you can copy files, you can link files. It's got incredible ability to, so if you have a really big movie, so you obviously don't want to transfer that to the other app, right? You want the other app to be able to access a movie that's sitting in your app, right? So you can actually do those things, something that most invocation frameworks can't handle.
Do you want to talk this one?
Sure. OK, so this one is talking about what the invocation framework does when you install the app, right? So when you install the app, you have some items in your Config.xml that let you register the app with the Config.xml, and your app can also listen to the invocation event, right? So obviously, if you get invoked, you want to find out how you got invoked, right? Who invoked you, what kind of information they're sending you, and all of those cool things. And we'll talk about all those things in a bit. The bottom flow is kind of showing what happens when a client invokes a target. So client's the app that is invoking, and target's the app that is being invoked, right? So the client invokes the target app. Invocation framework invokes the target. Then the target gets invoked, obviously, and then the target receives an invoked event. Right? It's pretty simple stuff, but.
This is really where kind of the peak and flow concept comes in. So this is one of the core user experience concepts that we are introducing, the ability to take pieces of functionality and expose it for wider use outside of your application. And obviously, there are system capabilities exposed for you to be able to use. So there's a standard camera functionality that you can seamlessly bring into your application, the system camera capture, and you can take a picture the card goes away, and we're going to talk about cards in a second, and the data is passed back to you. So you don't have to write your own sort of capture integration with a camera API to just get a picture if that's all you want to do. You can leverage system functionality to do that. And all this functionality comes into your application as an overlay, like a single window. Think of it as a stack of cards, so there's functionality that gets layered over top. And that allows the whole peak and flow concept of if you've got some content in your application or a card that provides functionality, the user can drag and expose what's behind it, what's in the stack of windows, right? So it's really about bringing concepts and functionality into your application in your user experience, rather than having to do the in and out process that we talked about in the keynote about switching between tasks or going to other applications, coming back. You never lose the context of what you're doing. And
your user feels familiar with things that you're doing, right? So if all apps that are invoking the camera invoke the card, your user knows how to use the camera card, right? It's not things that you are introducing on the platform, so you get a seamless experience.
So this is just kind of an overview, I guess, of the different options that are available in the actual invocation, what kind of data you would actually pass when you want to invoke something on the system. There's first the target. So this is actually identifying a specific component that you might want to target. This is what's called a bound invocation. So you know what the target is. You know you're going to hit the camera card or the picture card. You know you're going to hit the browser, something like that. The second is the actual actions. So there are system-provided actions, things like view, edit, open, some common types of actions you might want to take. You can also specify your own custom actions, and we're going to talk a little bit about when you want to be a target of an invocation, how that kind of thing works as well. The types, so you can specify particular MIME types related to the content you're going to pass through this invocation, so it's an image type or things like that. Then the last two are sort of they're companion. You usually specify one or the other. You specify either the URI to the data that's going to get passed. So if you don't want to pass actual data but a reference to it, you use the URI. But if you want to actually pass specific data through the actual invocation call, you would use the data field.
So the most common, so there's some interesting things here. So if you don't specify the target, right, it's basically gone into a mode where it's going to figure out, broker your request, right? The invocation framework will figure out what action you're trying to do, right? So if you're trying to do an open action, so it's going to go query all the ones that do an open action, check the type that you've specified, check the URI, and see, oh, this is the invocation, this is the target that can best handle your request, right? And also, we'll take care of things like, so for example, I always share my pictures to Twitter, right? But I always share my videos through Facebook, right, or BBM, right? So it will give them more priority. And if somebody just specifies a share picture, it'll automatically go to Twitter, right? It won't, like it's constantly learning, right?
So do you want to demo the invoking the browser?
Do you want to switch to HTML, please? OK, so first off, this is a page that is built using jQuery Mobile. And Jason Scott, you can talk to him about it. OK, so the first one we're going to show here is invoking the browser, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to invoke many things. We're going to first do the invocation, show you the demo, and then show you on the screen how we did the invocation, right? OK, so this is something that most people should be familiar with, is invoking the browser. So, right? So this invoked the browser with whatever, BlackBerry. I think it goes to blackberry.com.
So this is an example of actually leaving the application, going to another application. We're going to show later something about bringing functionality into your application. So there's kind of two different ways that this can go.
Right.
The lists are open applications?
The list that's provided in there is just potential targets that we've implemented.
You'll see, like we'll go over them one by one. OK. Can you go back to the computer, please?
We're going to be going back and forth a few times here.
OK.
Cool. All right, so this one is probably the simplest example you're going to see. So it's just a function in JavaScript, invoke browser, and there's the namespace blackberry.invoke, and the actual function invoke. And all we're passing is a URI here. So we're actually not even specifying browser. All we're saying is we want to invoke this URI, and the system has figured out, OK, the URI, HTTP type, what's on the system right now, all it's got is a browser to handle this type of data, and it just says, boom, go, browser, take this data, display it, and you're done.
So for instance, say that you had 2 browsers installed, right? And it will take the browser that you normally use. So it's kind of interesting. OK, can you go back to the device, please? I'm making his life pretty hard.
He had it really easy in my previous sessions.
OK. Can you go back to the device? Excellent. So what we're doing this time is invoking the FilePicker. So this is something that comes up all the time. You want to, the FilePicker can be used for several things. It's not just picking a file, but it's possible that you want your user to pick a directory to save a file, right? So see that? So that's the FilePicker. And you see here, it can select picture or music. And why it can select these two is because those are the parameters I pass to it. But we're going to talk about invoking that as well in a second. And so that's it. Here's all the peak and
so this is an example of an actual card. This is the concept of a window of functionality that's brought into your application and enables the peak paradigm of being able to see what's in your application. So you haven't left your app at this point. So this is this first example of the card concept.
Yeah, you could pick a file here, or you could, if I had anything, a camera. This is going to pick Rory's picture. Okay, so that's basically, it picks it and brings it back to your app, and you have the path for that file, and you can do whatever you want with it at that point.
Can we go back to the presentation?
So there are many ways to use the FilePicker, and this is kind of interesting. So you can use the input type file, right? And in the background, that's actually invoking the FilePicker. You could specify an accept image, and then it'll go into picture mode. But if you don't specify it, it'll obviously go into. So you could have done a different MIME type, right? You could have done video /star. And in that case, it's just invoking it with that type in the background, right? So it's kind of interesting. Pickers can be fairly complicated in general because pickers let you do many things. For example, the FilePicker lets you pick single files, multiple files, saver mode, multiple saver mode, image crop mode, and the list keeps on going. So we obviously don't want users to, or like you guys, to have to actually understand all these options and put them all in a massive invocation call, right? So we built an API that should solve and should make your life pretty easy. And it's just blackberry.invoke.card, and you invoke FilePicker, right? So similarly, you have many, many options there. Actually, probably only 2 right now, but soon a lot more, right? So this is how we invoked the FilePicker that you just saw. So build a details object there. You're picking the mode. There can be many different modes. Type is basically you have picture or music, right? So those are the 2 options that you saw in that dropdown. And then you just invoke it, and the rest is just
these are your
callbacks.
callbacks.
So if you look here, so on done is what you get back if the user actually selected a file. On cancel, if they didn't select, they just canceled their request. And on invoke is when the card is actually invoked, right? You might want to still do other things at that point. Like you don't want to stop doing work, whatever your app is doing, just because the card is in front of it. All right, can you go back, please? Right. Smile. already got so many pictures of him at this point. I promised to delete them.
No, not YouTube.
So basically what you saw there was similar to the FilePicker, right? So can you go back, please? I told you, this is not going to be easy.
So yeah, again, this is input types. There's multiple options here again. So this is input type of file, and this is the HTML5 media capture capabilities that are in the new browser, and obviously WebWorks gets this as well. So you can specify camera or camcorder. HTML media capture has a third option, which is, I think it's microphone, I think it's called. We currently don't support microphone, but I believe you do get audio on the camcorder mode. But we don't have a dedicated audio recording card at this point, so that's why we currently don't support the microphone option. But similar to the FilePicker, we've also created a separate API if you wanted to invoke it straight from JavaScript, and it handles some of these complexities of building an actual invocation call by putting an API around it. All right, fun stuff. So go back to the device, please.
Okay, so it's one thing to invoke apps that you know exist on a device, right? But you might want to create an app that you want everyone should be able to invoke, right? And so from the menu, you'll appear, like you want to appear in the share list, or you want to appear in many different lists, right? So what we are going to show here is a custom card that we created using jQuery Mobile. And it's basically a replica of the native picture viewer. I think it's better. All right, so see here. Or it can just not work. Oh, there we go. So basically, this is so it's a picture viewer, right? And it doesn't do a whole lot, not yet.
But this is also, this is actually a separate WebWorks application on the device that's exposing an invocation target for viewing of images. And this WebWorks application has invoked it. So we're showing both ends of the pipe here. You are invoking stuff from a WebWorks application, and you are being invoked as a WebWorks application as well.
And just to, just for fun, we added a share button down here. And see, it brings up something like NFC, because you can share that. This MIME type you can share with it, right? So obviously, if you set the MIME type to something else, you can make it share to BBM and so on to other.
And peeking as well works here.
Yep. So.
Oh, you didn't change?
Shh. All right,
so what's also interesting here to see is we've now got a WebWorks application that has had a Cascades-based card brought into it. Those are the system things like the FilePicker that we showed before. But now we've also brought WebWorks into WebWorks. So there's no boundaries here between the technologies as well. So if you're a WebWorks application, you can be a card, you can invoke a card. It doesn't matter whether those things are web or native. They just all work and they flow into each other.
So it's completely runtime agnostic, right? Do you want to go back, please? Hopefully this will last on. Okay.
Yep.
Do you mind stepping up to the mic, please?
So the question is, if you're allowing somebody to download your application from WebWorks, maybe you decide that your application would work better in that kind of a situation to have a separate viewer that you put up. Would you be able to bundle two applications?
You can bundle, so you want your app to be a viewer.
I want to have, say I want to have an app, and I also want to call in another viewer that I've created outside of.
Sure.
Yep.
You'll just have to redirect the invocation request from one page to the other. It won't be two apps. It'll be all one app, one big app with two pages.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if there may be some reasons where you may want to keep them as two separate apps, potentially.
No reason. If you got somebody to download one app, you might as well give them everything you have, right?
Yeah, because I don't think, the basis kind of for that is that I don't think there's a way in one bar to have two basically separate applications, right?
Well, it'll appear as one app on the home screen.
Yeah,
Right.
if you had something with, say, modular, we'll call it modular, maybe it would be two apps that you sell. So you know what, I guess I'm kind of answering my question. If you have two apps that you sell.
Right.
Okay. Well, if you want to sell two apps, then they're two separate apps. If you want to sell one app. So what you saw there was the invocation of a bound card, right? So I know the target ID, and I said, okay, well, since I know the target ID, I'm just going to call the picture card, picture.card. And I know the action. This is the action that it specifies. To be honest, I didn't have to specify it, but did it anyways just to explain. And the image that you saw was actually an image that was sitting locally in my bar. It was local to me, like to the client app, right? So that's really interesting that you can use a local protocol there. You can use the file protocol if you wanted. It doesn't matter. Like the invocation framework will handle all permissions for you. You don't have to worry about it. So if you had a document in your app and you wanted to open it in Docs2Go, and you would just link it and send it. Like you don't have to do anything, and that app can actually get write permissions on something that's sitting in your bar, like your app, right? Okay.
So returning data from a card. So you've now invoked a card. It's come into your application. You want to get the data back from it. So you actually register for an event called onChildCardClosed. And when the card is done processing, it populates response data. And this is where you get it back from the card. You get the reason of why it was closed. So this could be save. It could be something like cancel if the user actually canceled, so you know that nothing was chosen. You get the type.
It varies from card to card. There's no standardized protocol here, except for that there'll be a reason, there'll be a type, and there'll be data. But what people put in their cards, is up to them. I suggest you use nice words.
So being invoked. So we've kind of seen both sides, but let's talk a little bit about actually presenting from a Workbox application a target for being invoked. And we'll, where are they done with this? Custom picture view. Preview.
Well, we just did.
Yeah, so we're going to show it again?
No, well,
all right, perfect.
Just, you know,
all right,
reminding people.
Perfect. So this is actually what you specify in Config.xml. So there's the reason why you have to put something into the Config.xml file is that you don't necessarily want to have to be run once or whatever to register with the system so the system knows that you're providing functionality. So if it's in the Config.xml file in the manifest of your application description, as soon as the app is installed, it's available to be providing the functionality you want to provide as a target, right? So the system knows from this example that you've got a card previewer type, and you're going to accept actions of type view, and you'll accept MIME types of type text. So now the system knows if some other application wants to view a text file, you can handle that, and you can be a target for invocation.
So, so a picture viewer will normally set the MIME type to image, right? What I'm trying to show here is that it doesn't matter, because we did a bound invocation, and it doesn't matter what the MIME type is, right? So I could have been registered for nothing, and it wouldn't have still wouldn't have mattered, right? You can't do things like MIME type star. Please don't do things like that, right? Because you can't possibly handle all MIME types. You'll just appear in bizarre lists in people's menus and stuff, and people will delete your app. So, you know,
we would definitely delete your app.
We will probably delete your app, right? But yeah, you can specify any MIME type. So it could be custom MIME types as well that you know you can handle, and you know that other apps will call you with, right? So it's perfectly extensible. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is the picture viewer that you saw, we are going to build it, right, step by step. And when Jason and I were building it, we were trying to basically build it in under 30 lines of code, see if we can actually do it, right? And actually, we were very successful. So being invoked, right? So the first, so as a picture viewer, the most important thing is that you have an image tag and you can actually show a picture, right? So what we do here is we register for a blackberry.invoke.add-event-listener invoked, right? So what happens is when somebody invokes you, this is the this is the event that gets fired. And all I'm doing here is we take the object and set the get element by ID, get the image, and just set the source to the URI that was sent, right? So now this is very interesting. The URI that we sent was local colon / in one of the previous slides, if you remember. But that doesn't mean anything to this app, right? But you'll notice that the invocation framework will take care of it. It will actually send you the correct file path that you can access from your app, right? So it's actually, we call it box-to-box file transfer. So if you read our docs and you read those, that's basically what it's talking about. Okay, so then we have the back button. So if you remember in the picture previewer, we had a back button at the bottom part. And all we're doing there is we are sending card request closure, right? So we are closing the card from there by pressing the back button, and that's how we do it. You just have a blackberry.invoked.card request closure, and you can pass all the data that we talked about, reason, type, and data. Obviously, in this case, you don't care. You're not sending anything back. But if you were a card that did like a FilePicker, you'd send actual data back with it, right? Peak. So this is the most interesting parts, and there's still a lot of debate on how we should have done this. But basically, what we did, so basically what you get is you get the ability to start the peak. That's it. You don't get the ability to control how the user is going to do it. You don't get any of that control. All you have to say is when this certain thing happens, you can start the peak, right? So what we do here is we put a little peak area, div on the left side, in this case only 10% of the width. Ken wanted me to change that to 50%, but clearly that didn't make it all the way to the slides. So basically here, we're just waiting for the touch start on that peak area. And if it happens, we start the peak.
And that's all you have to do, and the system takes over from that point. So the user's now touched there, you started the peak, and now all they're doing is they're dragging it. The system's handling that gesture and understanding that the card
it basically
needs to move
takes
back and
over.
forth.
It just takes over, and you lose the control from your app, right? So that's why, and once the user does it, you get control back again, and the system loses it. Then you must call start peak again for it to again get control, right? So this little div works really well, right? It actually can't get any simpler than this, right? The share button. This is actually probably one of the most interesting parts of the invocation framework. It allows you to query, right? So a lot of times people have asked me questions during the conference. Hey, how do I do NFC? Or how do I do this? How do I do that? And it seems like the answer for most of them is, well, just use the invocation framework, right? And this is it. This is one of the probably the most powerful part of the invocation framework. You get to say, I want to share, right? So you go action equals bb action.share. I have data that is of type image, right? So you go type image star, and I want target types of applications or cards, right? Or all, right? So there could be other things. There are other possibilities are services, there are viewers, there's a lot of different things, right? So that some of them you will see in later versions, some of them are available today, right? But basically you have to specify a target type. So you could have said that I only want cards, right? So you could have said that I only want cards. I don't want the user to feel like they left my app, right? And in that case, you won't get any of the applications. So in this case, we are obviously trying to share. And this will return us a list of all the items that, all the apps that allow you to share, right? So all the apps that in their Config.xml or bar descriptor, if you're using the native SDK, specified here, image, MIME type image star will, and action, bb action.share. will actually appear in that list. So, sorry, right here. So you will get, in this case, you saw you got NFC, right? Because that is an easy way to share. There's no other apps on this phone. Otherwise, you'd see things like BBM, you'd see all the other apps that allow you to share. So it's actually very powerful. And then once you get the response, you just have to build your list and show it, right? If you have questions about that, Jason Scott's your man. Okay, so.
Yeah, so some advanced concepts here that we wanted to leave to the end because we didn't want to clutter it up, but things to sort of be aware of. So when you're actually passing data in an invocation framework, we were showing a bit earlier the difference between data and URI. So there's some guidelines here. If you're actually going to pass small data, you can go through the data method rather than the URI. The thing here is that you want to keep it small because it is base 64 encoded when it gets passed through the invocation framework. So you definitely don't want to do anything big here. And when you actually go to send it, you'll have to do the A to B to actually base 64 encode it.
Yeah, don't read files and put it in here.
Right.
And send off, like use URIs for something like that, right? Wherever you can use your URIs, use URIs. Where you can't, and you have a lot of options. So a bunch of the pickers, for example, would take in JSON objects as data, right? So obviously in that case, you have to use it, but most times you don't.
So passing Unicode. So if you're actually going to use the data and you need to pass Unicode, you do need to do some specific things here because the A to B, B to A typically around the world will fail on Unicode characters. So you actually have to encode it before sending. So this is just an example of if you have to send Unicode, you want to encode URI and then unescape on the sending end, and then the other side has to reverse that. Right? Sorry?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out the encode URI component and escape.
If it's don't need to worry too much about it. If you need to pass Unicode, you just do this. Yeah. No problem.
Sorry.
No problem. All right, so you can actually provide some more options for actually filtering about what kind of data you can process. So not only can you specify the MIME type and action that you can receive invokes for, you can actually specify particular file extensions or URIs and domains. So you can specify that you only want to receive invokes with data that are coming from a specific domain's region. So we want to show a little bit of an example here about push. So push notifications also come through the Invoked framework, and they come through the onInvoked event. And this is the actual Config.xml version of what you need to put in if you want to be a target of push. So it's a type application. You need to specify that you handle the bb.action.push type.
Sorry.
I'm not that boring, am I? All right.
I was trying to throw it at.
Crap. MIME type application /vend.push. That's the MIME type for push notifications. And the big thing here I wanted to point out is this rim permissions tag, rim permit, run when backgrounded. So when a push comes in, the system processes it, and it actually launches your application, but puts it in the background. So if you were really quick and your application wasn't really good and handled the push really quick and closed again, if they switch to the active running icon, they'd actually see your application in there. But it's not in the foreground. And so what this flag does is it allows the JavaScript engine in the browser environment that we run in to actually process this data and run in the background. So this is really key if you need to process push messages.
Typically for push, what most applications that handle push data do is they will exit at the end of processing their push, right? So the app gets pushed, they check if it's of type push, and they do whatever work they have to, set the notifications, put their notifications into BlackBerry Hub, or whatever they have to do, right? And then just close, right? So even though it appears in the task manager briefly, the user would never know. It's actually so fast that it's kind of impossible.
Should be. So if you're processing push notifications, you definitely want to do it as quick as possible and get out And the big thing, like you said, the use case is putting something in Hub that'll actually invoke your application back when the user actually wants to take action on this notification.
You only get 12 kilobytes or 8 kilobytes or something.
Yeah, it's a really small message.
So
that's basically it for Invoke. So I'm sure you've seen a bunch of these. We've got roundtables at 6 p.m. Continue the conversation. This is Session Jam 44. Download the conference app because it's going to be really useful at this point if you don't already have it. And if you have reasons to believe, go onto the booth and let us know. I hope you do have reasons to believe. So I think Invoke is really fundamental to what we're trying to achieve with BlackBerry 10, and hopefully this gives you an idea of what we're doing and how to get your app ready for it. So we'll take questions. If you have them, please go to the mic. Let us know what you want to know. Questions?
So for something as simple as push, we're requiring someone to, as soon as they open up the app, look at a field that says, yes, I accept that this is going to run in the background.
No,
it's not.
That's just a flag to the system to say that your application will be able to process JavaScript in the background.
So permissions are of multiple types. So permissions, I think, that you've seen in the past are of type prompt. So that's why they prompt the user. So for example, access shared. You want to tell the user that, oh, this app is going to be looking at your pictures, music, so, right? But something like run in background is not a prompt permission. It is so that we can handle other apps more efficiently. So most apps don't need to do this, right? So most apps don't need to run JavaScript in background, right? So if somebody has paused, they have paused. You don't need to really run the JavaScript in the background. And I suggest you don't. Right?
Other questions? The question is whether you have tutorials and guidelines. Yeah, there's definitely stuff in our documentation. It's, I don't know if we have one central place for Invoke. It's mostly in the API reference or
right
the config.xml.
I'm going to put this up.
Look at the presentation. Yeah, we have sample code for this as well up in GitHub, so you can see a full working sample as well. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.